America's top diplomat says Iraq's fate could be decided in the coming week. This is Special Reports. Good evening, I'm Shannon Bream in for Brett Baer. Secretary of State John Kerry got another chance today to play the role of global peacemaker, talking with top officials of Iraq's warring political and religious coalitions. He says time is running out for a solution. Meanwhile, President Obama continues to be on the defensive about how the situation got so out of control so quickly. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen is traveling with the Secretary of State tonight and reports from Baghdad.
With the fighting in Iraq and other Mideast crises testing his stewardship of U.S. foreign policy as never before, President Obama conducted an unusual round of morning show interviews where his reception was not always bright and sunny.
You said that the war was ended in Iraq.
Yeah.
You said al-Qaeda was decimated.
Yeah.
You said it was stable.
It was, but just because something's stable 2 years ago or 4 years ago doesn't mean that it's stable right now.
And that brought Secretary of State John Kerry on a hastily scheduled visit to Baghdad under heavy security for a nearly 2-hour sit-down with embattled Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, a Shiite, and leading Sunni and Kurdish politicians as well. Kerry's mission? To light a fire under them to create a new unity government before ISIS or ISIL, the Sunni insurgency inspired by al-Qaeda that has captured major Iraqi cities one by one and committed heinous atrocities along the way, marches on to Baghdad and lights the capital itself on fire. ISIS fighters over the weekend seized strategic crossings near borders with Syria and Jordan, including the town of Al-Qaim, which saw the group wage a 3-day campaign with artillery fire and 50 caliber machine guns. In response, Kerry spoke of the U.S. ramping up various kinds of support for Iraq, including intelligence, military command and control assistance, and ammunition supplies.
The support will be intense, sustained, and if Iraq's leaders take the necessary steps to bring the country together, it will be effective.
Should the Iraqi leaders dither, however, Kerry said the president, quote, won't be hampered.
Make no mistake, the president has moved the assets into place and has been gaining each day the assurances he needs with respect to potential targeting.
In the meantime, senior State Department officials say ISIS is many things all at once: a terrorist group, a criminal syndicate, and a full-fledged army, and that al-Maliki and his colleagues have been deeply unnerved, fearfully looking to the U.S. to repel the invaders by wielding, as one Kerry aide put it, a magic wand. Most eager to dispel the existence of such a thing was the American commander-in-chief.
There's no amount of American firepower that's going to be able to hold the country together, and I've made that very clear to Mr. Maliki and all the other leadership inside of Iraq.
What all observers agree on is that the success of ISIS has raised the stakes enormously.
It is now the most dominant radical Islamic force that's ever been established in the region.
At all points, Secretary Kerry has sought to drive home to all concerned that the threat posed by ISIS is not simply to the Shia sect in Iraq, but to all sects, and not simply to Iraq, but to all of her neighbors in the region as well. And that point is likely to recur later in this trip when the Secretary sits down with the Saudis, the Emiratis, and other U.S. allies in the Persian Gulf. Traveling with the Secretary of State in Baghdad, James Rosen, Fox News.
The latest developments going forward in Iraq have a lot of people looking backward tonight. Senior political analyst Britt Hume is here to talk about that. Good evening, Britt.
Hi, Shannon. The crisis in Iraq has reopened the old arguments over the war with Iraq, with one side contending the Bush administration is to blame for waging a war that never should have been fought. The other side says that war was in fact won and that the Obama administration is unwon it by rushing for the exits. Certainly the Bush blamers have a point if they mean the war should not have been fought for its original rationale, which was elimination of weapons of mass destruction that were never found. But they also argue that if we just left Iraq alone, Saddam Hussein would have remained securely in power and would have been a bulwark against Iran and would also have prevented the bloody sectarian warfare that is now raging. We'll never know, but it seems hard to believe that the uprising against dictators that has engulfed the Middle East would have somehow left Iraq untouched. Then there was the presence in Saddam's Iraq of the notorious terrorist Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, founder of what came to be known as al-Qaeda in Iraq and is now known as the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS. The U.S. killed Zarqawi in 2006, and by the time Barack Obama came to power, al-Qaeda in Iraq had been dealt a humiliating defeat. That was not, of course, the original reason for the war. but it was one reason why the U.S., including the Obama administration, could claim a major victory there, a victory from whose jaws defeat is now slowly being snatched. Shannon?
Britt, how much blame do you think al-Maliki bears? Because he's taking a lot of heat.
I think he deserves a tremendous share of the blame. He's been an unfortunate leader. He has kept the Sunnis from feeling a sense of participation. And managing a leader like this in a place where we have a great stake is one of the most difficult jobs of the presidency and of a president and his Secretary of State. But it is part of the job. And I think we as a nation and our leadership bears responsibility for the way Maliki has acted. And part of that owes something to the fact that we have basically vacated the premises militarily, which I think would clearly have given us more leverage in dealing with him.
We'll see if Secretary Kerry has any luck this week.
Exactly.
Thanks, Brett. Well, a slap in the face, a pat on the back, or both from the Supreme Court tonight for the Environmental Protection Agency. In a complex, divided opinion today, the Supreme Court either dealt the Environmental Protection Agency a stunning blow or upheld most of the agency's power to regulate greenhouse gases, depending on whom you ask. The dispute centered on the EPA's decision to broadly expand its regulatory powers under the Clean Air Act, while critics argued it did so by sidestepping Congress and its legislative powers. Writing for the majority, Justice Antonin Scalia said, quote, "An agency has no power to tailor legislation to bureaucratic policy goals by rewriting unambiguous statutory terms," adding, quote, "Were we to recognize the authority claimed by EPA in the tailoring rule, we would deal a severe blow to the Constitution's separation of powers. Under our system of government, Congress makes laws, and the President, acting at times through agencies like EPA, faithfully executes them."
The Supreme Court absolutely slapped down both the EPA and the Obama administration for trying to rewrite the language of the Clean Air Act.
The court's primary dissent, authored by Justice Stephen Breyer, said the majority's interpretation made no sense. Quote, "The expert agency charged with administering the act has determined that greenhouse gases endanger human health and welfare, and so sensible regulation of industrial emissions of those pollutants is at the core of the purpose behind the act." And in fact, much of the agency's power to do so remains intact.
So while the court did take away one method of greenhouse gas emission regulations, it left in place a way of reducing greenhouse gas emissions that basically gives EPA everything that it wanted out of this case.
EPA does call the decision a win and says it's consistent with the agency's efforts to implement the president's climate action plan. The next round of opinions comes Wednesday morning, with the court's term set to wrap next Monday. U.S. mayors meeting in Texas have unanimously approved a resolution calling for the use of nature in fighting the effects of climate change. The proposal encourages but does not mandate natural solutions to protect water supplies, trees, coastlines, and air quality. Well, the Clintons have always had an unusual relationship with the English language. President Bill Clinton famously wondered aloud about what the definition of the word is. Well, now Hillary Clinton has questions about who may be truly well off in our society. Fox News media analyst and host of Fox's Media Buzz, Howard Kurtz, takes a look.
We came out of the White House not only dead broke, but in debt.
From the moment Hillary Clinton made that comment to ABC's Diane Sawyer, she has struggled to find the right tone in talking about her considerable wealth.
Let me just clarify that I fully appreciate how hard life is for so many Americans today. Bill and I were obviously blessed. We worked hard for everything we got in our lives, and we have continued to work hard.
Now Clinton tells The Guardian that Americans don't resent her success, quote, because we pay ordinary income tax, unlike a lot of people who are truly well off, and we've done it through dint of hard work. But can Clinton really contend she's not truly well off when she has 2 luxurious houses, got an $8 million book advance, gives $200,000 speeches, and when the Clintons have made more than $100 million?
This is what happens when politicians try to be something that they are not. And the fact is that Hillary Clinton has been living a life of luxury for 40 years.
But the criticism isn't just coming from the right. The Washington Post today quotes 3 unnamed Obama advisors as hitting Hillary on her personal wealth. One advisor calls it a massive issue and says it's time for the Democrats to panic. Another likens her to Mitt Romney and says she seems completely out of touch and elitist. And Dick Harpootlian, a former South Carolina Democratic chairman, says she's generating an imperial image. Of course, the Clintons are nowhere near as wealthy as the Romneys, and Hillary grew up in a middle-class family. But the Elizabeth Warren wing of her party now views her as too centrist and too close to Wall Street. While the Obama advisors who trashed Hillary Clinton in the Washington Post would only do so anonymously, they reflect a certain sense of unease among the Democrats. And this points up Hillary's challenge, finding a way to talk about her family fortune without seeming disconnected from the middle class. Shannon?
Howard, thank you. Up next, why the Obama administration says it was legal to kill an American-born terror leader overseas. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates are covering tonight. Fox 25 in Boston with a deadly crash involving an Amtrak train and a vehicle. Officials believe that vehicle was being driven on the tracks. 3 people inside were killed. None of the passengers on the train were hurt. Q13 Fox in Seattle with a not guilty plea from professional soccer star Hope Solo. The former Olympian was arrested Saturday in a domestic violence dispute involving her sister and nephew. She appeared in court today and was released without bail. And this is a live look at Philadelphia from Fox 29. They are following the approval late this afternoon of a proposal to permanently allow children under 12 years old to be included on the adult organ donor list for lungs. Last year, then 10-year-old Sarah Murnahan was placed on the list by order of a federal judge. The girl received 2 sets of lungs with the second transplant deemed a success. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.